term ex ovo omnia. Ex ovo omnia means all from the egg. Okay, and we know that this is not wrong. It is actually what is the situation, and everything develops from an egg in animal kingdom. So that was first put forward by William Harvey in 1651. Again, if you go down, we can see there is Caspar Friedrich Wolff, who talked about there is an essential force. So this force is more or less a preformationist supporting view, that this external force is what has contributed to the formation. So like the natural laws, in natural laws there is magnetism, there is gravity that acts as a force of nature. Similarly, a concept that there is an essential force from external environment in the nature that is contributing to the embryonic development. That is what his view was, but that is not the case. We know from our knowledge that we have gained. Again, Immanuel Kant in 1724 and Friedrich Blumenbach. Uh, these are German people, and we know there is important contribution by German scientists in the developmental biology knowledge. So they gave the term Milden Gus tribe. Okay, that is developmental force. Again, this is a preformationist kind of a support of theory that is being spoken over here. So we know the cell theory. Okay, so we know about Theodore Schwann, who talked about cell as the basic building block, and he was the person who spoke about this model, how the development proceeds in a bit by bit, brick by brick manner. This brick in the animal kingdom is nothing but a cell, and this is the functional unit and which can give rise to the multicellular organism. So that was first put forward by Theodor Schwann. So along with Matthias Schleiden, uh, this concept was given. And later on, we see that the crucial step forward in the understanding of the development and the knowledge about egg, that egg itself is the single cell. Okay, so egg is a single cell, albeit a little huge cell. Um and we can see in cheek that is it's such a huge thing we can see through a naked eye. Okay, so when we look under microscope we can see that single cell. So uh, egg is a single cell. That concept was given in 1840s. So if you go later on, we find that the work of Christian Pander, Rathke, and Carl Ernst von Baer. Okay, these few people have basically transformed the embryology. So once their role came into the picture, the things started to move dramatically, and they gave a big step or a jump into the knowledge gaining process. So basically, Pander discovered what we call as the germ layers. Now you know there are three germ layers in animal world, which we call as the endoderm, the mesoderm, and the ectoderm. So there are triploblastic organisms, even few which are diploblastic, where only two germ layers are involved. But most of the higher forms are triploblastic. They are having three germ layers. So these three germ layers were observed and identified by Christian Pander in the first instance. Okay, and Rathke was the person who observed uh, and compared. So one of the important aspect of developmental biology knowledge gaining process is look at organisms, few organisms, and what we do is when we look at few organisms, we compare them. So this is an important aspect that we do. By comparison, we can generalize few things and we can find out distinct aspects in the organisms. What is the unique aspect that is present? So comparison is an important work that is being done. So what we call as comparative developmental biology study, or what we call as comparative embryology. So that what has been done is we look at a few part, or a particular part, and we compare it how its development proceeds in different organisms. So by doing this comparison, he was able to elaborate the vertebrate skull development as well as the pharyngeal arches development, and from where do they originate and how each structure uh, is found. The similar kind of a originating structure is found in all these organisms, but gradually later on in the development they take the particular shape that we associate with. So they are all found in equal measure in all the organisms early in the development, but the shape that takes up the final form of the organisms actually is contributed later on, and the final form comes in later on from that same particular part. So that comparative analysis was done by Rathke, and it is an important work. And with this kinds of comparison, they could able to pick up the general principles, and we can and were able to elaborate it. So the four principles came about by this comparative study, and this four principle was enlisted by Ernst von Baer, and this is what we call as the four principles of Carl Ernst. We will be enlisting those principles in the next slides. Again, one of the important contributor was August Weismann, and Weismann's important principle was the germ cell theory. And what he said was the cell that is there, that is the ultimate zygote that is there, it is having the germs necessary. The germ means the elements necessary to give rise to the adult structures. Okay, so that we can call as the elements that he basically was referring to the genetic elements. Okay, so these seeds that we call as the genetic elements, okay, this were present in the cell itself, and this gets distributed among the different cells that arise later on. And then based on what it accumulates, basically it gets transformed and takes a particular function. So the differentiation process that we understand in the organism is basically a result of what we call as the germ pool getting distributed. Okay, so this is not exactly the true concept, but it is somewhat related to what we know, that the genes are contributing and the genetic elements switching on and switching off. Basically the process of differentiation has contributed to the developmental process. But his understanding, his principle was going down the line that the elements get segregated. Okay, and part of that element lies in one particular cell, and based on what element it has picked up, it would function into a particular type of cell. Okay, so that was the concept. So it is like a more like a mosaic concept, like mosaic tiles. Now each tile, a mosaic tile, there is stones that are lying inside it. Now colorful stones are laid in some tiles, old type of tiles that are laid on the floor. It has different colored stones. Okay, so each in a particular tile, if you pick up 1 feet by 1 feet tile, you see different elements. Okay, which we can call as the colored stones. So these elements are each distinct, each have a ability to function differently. So what we were saying is that each of these elements segregate later on, and in a mosaic like manner, whatever it has acquired, it would function. So mosaic is a collection of different entities. So like this is what his concept was. And he gave a mosaic developmental model for unraveling it. So if you look at August Weismann's work, he did his work in tunicates. Okay, so there is one form of invertebrate organism that we call as tunicates, a sea marine organism. So in tunicates, there is a cell which accumulates yellow pigments early in the development, and it was observed that this yellow pigment carrying cells later on develop into the tail muscles. So basically they form muscle cells, and they ultimately lead to the muscles in the tail. So the correlation was that the muscle forming germ pool, okay, the elements was lying in that yellow pigmented cell. That's why it transformed itself. Okay, so that was what was his conclusion by based on the observation in the tunicates. Okay, so a macho factor, macho means strength, isn't it, dominant force, isn't it, like that, what we call as the term macho. And we know force is associated, is originating from muscles. So those factors that contribute to muscle formation is what we call as the macho factor. So that macho factor is found in this yellow pigmented cell, is what his understanding was. And it is like a mosaic kind of a development. Early on the development itself, the embryo has this yellow pigmented cell, and it has been destined to form the muscle, is what. So in this way, all the other cells have some of the other factors, is what is was assumption, and it is leading to what we call as a mosaic model. Okay, so a mosaic model of development.